Well, it finally happened. On this week's episode of the F1 Circus, we went to Canada, where we saw Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri come to blows in an epic last couple of laps. The two made contact, and Norris was unable to finish the race with front wing damage and suspension failure, while Oscar Piastri hobbled home in P4. This was an incredible viewing experience and gave me an amazing impression of how spectacular this sport really is. This race was a huge turning point for the driver's title, as tensions are beginning to rise and the pressure is becoming crushing. I don't expect this exchange to be the last one of its kind, and I think it could blow the season open as more drivers try to make their mark on the driver's title. Let's go to Saturday, where qualifying was as chaotic as ever. This week's drama was surrounding Aston Martin's window-licking dickhead, who withdrew from the previous race in Spain with alleged wrist complications, but returned to action for his home race this weekend. Q1 was interrupted by Alex Albon, when the engine cover of his Williams decided it no longer wanted to be a part of a Formula 1 car and yeeted itself into the middle of the circuit, causing a red flag. When the session restarted, Pierre Gasly, Liam Lawson, the wounded Spastic, Carlos Sainz, and Gabriel Bortoleto were eliminated. This is now the second race in a row where Carlos Sainz has been eliminated in Q1, a shocking result after having not been eliminated in Q1 since Abu Dhabi 2023. Admittedly, this performance was less by pace and more because Isaac Hadjar cock-blocked him at turn 6, greatly impacting his final run. In Q2, both Haas drivers were eliminated, as well as Nico Hülkenberg, Franco Colapinto, and Yuki Tsunoda, who qualified P11 but would drop down to last after a ridiculous 10-place grid penalty for overtaking a damaged Oscar Piastri under red flag conditions in free practice 3. I'm not really sure what the stewards wanted Yuki to do there. Maybe they just expected him to sit behind a damaged car going pit lane speed with debris spewing behind it. God, send these stewards to Siberia. Finally, we arrived at Q3 where something kind of exciting happened. The McLaren's performance didn't spike. For some reason, both drivers struggled to extract more performance out of the car, namely one Lando Norris, who was visibly struggling all session long. On his first run, he exceeded track limits after cutting the chicane at turn 12, and on his second run, he just had no pace. It got so bad that his race engineer flat out told him to just do a regular racing line because he was so off. Meanwhile, in the battle for pole, Verstappen set a provisional time of 1:11.2, marginally ahead of Piastri and a little bit further from the Mercedes and Leclerc. On their final runs, Charles Leclerc went first. He set a phenomenal first sector, but caught a snap of oversteer behind the dirty air of Isaac Hadjar and aborted the lap. Just another day for the Monegasque in his natural state of wanting to throw himself off a 14th floor balcony. In front of him was Lando Norris in P7, who qualified 8 tenths behind his teammate. 8 tenths. What the f? Meanwhile, Piastri, Verstappen, and Russell were dueling for pole on their final runs. Piastri pulled off a superhuman final sector for a 1:11.1, putting the pressure back on the Dutchman. Max remembered he was goated, however, and cleared the Aussie by just over half a tenth, now back into provisional pole. But just as everything began to settle, Osama bin Russell cooked up a purple middle sector and jihads it into pole position with the terrorizing 1:10.9, while his teammate Kimi Antonelli slots it into P4. This left us with a front row of Russell and Verstappen going into turn 1, leaving the media and Formula 1 fans around the world to go into Sunday cock in hand. As Russell's nerve intensified and the Verstappen riders had a nervous breakdown in the comments, we turned to the 5 red lights, waiting for chaos. Naturally, this meant that Russell had an excellent start, immediately pulling nearly a second on Verstappen while Antonelli went full send into turn 3 and cucked the championship leader for a step on the podium. Further back, Colapinto and Albon were duking for point positions, but Albon ran out of room and slid onto the grass at turn 6, tumbling down the order and into the depths of hell, otherwise known as the midfield DRS train. The Thai driver's day continued to get worse when the team informed him, as well as his teammate, of issues with the power unit, compromising the race strategy and forcing them both into a more conservative drive. Eventually, Williams pitted Alex at the worst possible time, causing another radio crash out and leaving him in dead last. As the race progressed, the strategy ended up shaking out to a 2-stop race for most of the front-running cars. As a result, Verstappen initially pressed Russell to try to get clean air. But give credit where it's due, George did a fantastic job keeping himself in a position where Verstappen couldn't launch an outright attack. Max cooked his tires a little bit and began to face pressure from the young Antonelli, who was doing well to keep Piastri at bay after a monster race start. Red Bull did a good job of protecting Max from the undercut, even though it was at the expense of a proper attack on Russell. The pit wall seemed content with P2, taking away points from the McLarens and minimizing any potential disasters like Spain. Norris and Leclerc pushed past Alonso and Hamilton, the latter suffering floor damage after skewering a groundhog on lap 13. That's not very vegan of you, Lewis. Lando and Charles Leclerc tried to go long on their medium tires, pitting at around lap 30. We then had jack shit happen for about the next 20 laps, as the front runners again began the second wave of pit stops around lap 50. We did have another spastic moment, as our beloved window licker tried to close the door from the inside on a straight, and nearly killed Pierre Gasly. The window licker couldn't even properly cause a safety car, and got himself a 10-second penalty for good measure. Poor Alex Albon's miserable day continued when his Mercedes power unit shit itself, conveniently at the hairpin where you could safely park in the runoff area so as to not create an obstruction. What is it with these Mercedes power units? Since Imola, it feels like everyone who's been using these power units have been at risk to power failure. Everyone besides McLaren at least, because that would be fun. Anyways, as we cling on to dear life trying to find some sort of entertainment, we were graced with chaos during the last 10 laps when Norris closed in on Piastri, who was in turn right up the gearbox of Kimi Antonelli. As the McLaren pit wall began to have a panic attack, everyone was waiting for the papaya rules bullshit to cuck us all of what we were waiting for all season long. As the 18-year-old Antonelli held on for dear life against the two championship leaders, both Norris and Piastri had DRS to attack and defend, so it was a straight-up brawl for P4 and potentially a step on the podium if they could catch Antonelli. This is it. The championship heavyweight battle we've been waiting for. Piastri versus Norris, Mercedes reincarnated. And it was f***ing epic. By lap 63, Norris had caught up to within 0.3 of his teammate, forcing Piastri to lay off Antonelli and go full defense as he attempted to maintain position. After 3 laps of edging, Norris sent a perfect dive bomb down into the turn 10 hairpin, momentarily gaining position over Piastri going into the casino straight. They get within inches of each other as they go wheel to wheel in a championship-deciding game of chicken. Lando blinks, and Oscar brakes just a touch later going into the turn 13 chicane, barely coming out ahead going into lap 67. As we all catch our breaths, Lando has an opportunity down the main straight going into turn 1. It is here where I recall the wisdom of the great Ayrton Senna, who once said, "If you no longer go for a gap that exists, you are no longer a racing driver." I would like to challenge this quote with this question. If you go for a gap that no longer exists, what does that make you? The answer, I learned, is Lando Norris, who cosplays as Senna by attempting to insert himself into a petite space, slamming into the barrier and tumbling out of the race. Holy shit. I'm by no means a fan of his, but I feel for Norris. I honestly think Lando's done for this season. He's still going to claw for wins, he's still going to take poles here and there, but this feels like France 2022, where a young driver makes a critical mistake that defines a season of missed opportunity. As the championship gap widens, Verstappen and Russell are breathing down his neck, and have been in significantly better form. Congratulations to George Russell for converting pole position into his 4th career victory, and to Kimi Antonelli for becoming the 3rd youngest podium scorer in F1 history. Max Verstappen dodges a potential race ban, despite George Russell's best efforts under the safety car. The Drivers' Championship is becoming more and more fascinating. With Piastri, Norris, Verstappen, and Russell separated by 20 points apiece, this fight gets really interesting if Russell and Mercedes continue this present form, and if the McLaren struggle like this again. The battle for 6th place in the Constructors becomes even spicier with the vets leading the charge. Haas and VCarb are level at 20 points apiece, led by Ocon and Hadjar respectively. Aston Martin are close behind with 22 points as Alonso returns to form, and Kick Sauber somehow have 20 points from Hulk getting power-ups by being in green. As we draw closer to the halfway point of the season, we head to Austria at the Red Bull Ring. Last year was a major turning point in the championship fight when Norris and Verstappen came together. Perhaps we'll get a similar moment or a continuation of Piastri and Norris coming together. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please leave a comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next week.
Lotus, Lotus, Lotus 72, Lotus, Lotus, Lotus 72, é máquina do tempo e na velocidade não tem igual.